but welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Jodo Cast, your Star Wars gaming podcast. This is episode 105. My name is Evan Lewis. I am, of course, joined by Leo Andre.
Hey.
Heyo, and Joe Latovsky.
Gonk.
Was that yonk or gonk?
Logically, which one would I have said?
I mean,
We know Joe. He's gonking all day, every day.
gonking like
Every
a
day I'm
gangster.
gonking.
Like a gongster. Gongster's paradise. And we've got a good show in store, I think. I'm excited to talk about today's topic. But before we get to that, we got to talk about our patrons.
Wouldn't it be bad if you open the episode with hey, and man, we got a real show in store today.
I mean,
Let me apologize ahead of time.
honestly, that's how I feel whenever we
listeners.
talk about video games, unless it's KOTOR related. Because most of our video game episodes are like, well, what kind of garbage are we talking about today?
Well, maybe if they'd make a non-garbage video game.
Well, exactly. Or if,
There might be ones soon.
we shall see.
Yeah.
Remains to be seen. I hardly see him smiling or cackling in that game, so I don't know what they're trying to do. He will always be the Joker to me, no matter what. But before all that, I don't even understand what... Okay, first of all, patrons are amazing. That's just a known fact. Patrons are amazing. And they get to join us while we record and send us messages that I don't even understand. Maybe someone else can tell me what our patron is telling us. Now there's a Jensen Ackles gif, which I can totally give a thumbs up to that, but I don't know what he's talking about.
Maybe I'm too old. I don't know what X3AP is either. I'm totally lost here.
But as a patron, X3AP campaign. What? What? I still don't know.
Triple
I still don't know. Oh, a 3X.
Triple X.
3X game. Okay.
Or it's...
Still lost. I'm sorry. I'm an old man. I get confused sometimes. It's a space simulator. Perfect. There you go. So you can join our patrons.
That does sound cooler than anything that they've made so far.
It's true.
Officially.
It's true. But you can be, if you're a patron, which in itself is fantastic, you can jump on while we're recording and send us messages that we have to spend minutes upon minutes, seconds upon seconds trying to figure out because we just don't understand what the heck it is. But we thank all of our patrons, the best people in the world, and someone else just became one of those best people, the JodoCast version of the Adeptus Astartes, Tommy Adams. Whoever you are, sir, whatever your name happens to be on the Discord, we thank you, and we hope to see you on here soon. I hope it's not the person that's talking to us right now, because that'd be super awkward. But I don't think it is.
What if this guy has no idea now what Adeptus Astartes is? And I mean, as far as he knows, you're just you could be insulting him.
It's true. I could be, but I'd like to think the was it conversation hints would lead them to think, wait a minute, he just said I'm the best person alive and then called me a bunch of Latin words. I hope that means best person alive in space Latin, because I'm pretty sure it does.
Isn't the Imperium? I mean, they're kind of they're a bunch of fascists.
You know what? That's a conversation for another day. I can certainly understand them being all purge the Xenos if their first encounters with Xenos are orcs and Tyranids. That's going to set a precedent for them. I'm just saying.
Are you saying that those entire races are one-dimensional and inherently evil? Because that's something a fascist would say.
I mean, if an alien species, a whole alien species,
tries to come across the border,
tries to eat you, and use your biological and technological distinctiveness to add to its own, and poop out little babies of its own that will eat other people. That's not great, right? But that's beside the point. You totally have hijacked. You've hijacked complimenting the patrons for your own ends. So everyone just ignore Joe. We're going to take Joe out of this equation. We're going to kick him off the show right now because he does not appreciate you the way the rest of us do. So thank you all. You can go to jodocast.com patreon.com/thejodocast or jodocast.com to find the link to get to it, to become a patron, to become one of the best people alive. And there's a cat making noise. And also join the Discord. You don't have to be a patron to join the Discord, but if you're a patron, you can jump in the chat right now and send us a whole bunch of weird gifts that we have to try to interpret while we are trying to do a show, and we love it to death. So thank you all. Jodocast.com, the place to be. And, if you prefer to listen to us on Spotify, I got to take Pandora off of here because that's just not a thing that's happening. Spotify, if you like Spotify, you can listen to us there. If you like...
Are we not on...
on Pandora?
So we're not... Yeah, so we're not...
I don't think so, because I never got a notification back that we were, so...
I didn't even know you could do podcasts on Pandora.
Spotify, certainly, and Stitcher, Google Play Music, and, of course, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, thanks to Joe, because when he's not insulting patrons, he's putting things on YouTube.
I didn't insult anybody.
I think
except
you did.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Except the Imperium of Man.
Yeah. I think that means Joe is a heretic. I could be wrong. But, as we said...
You're not wrong. I don't... So...
Well, all right, then. We're agreed!
You guys keep cutting out, so I can't, I don't know if I'm supposed to be defending myself.
That's the heresy getting in the way. Let's talk about what we've been playing before we purge each other across the internet. I am going to go first because I've been playing stuff. I've been playing Legion and more Legion, which I will expound on later during the main topic because it relates back to how I've been playing Legion. And I've been doing... I feel like I've been playing Uncharted 4, trying to get that wrapped up. What else? I think that's kind of it, really. Yeah, no. I think I've kept myself from playing WoW Classic because I'm going to guess
Sounds
some
like
paint.
Somebody spilled something.
Farts. No.
Now is when he censors his mouth?
Just a glass full of Jameson.
Oh, that's every bit as bad, son.
I forgot I had set it on the floor next to my chair, and then I moved my chair and rolled right into it.
How?
Son of a bitch.
Has it soaked into the floor yet? There's still time. 5-second rule.
All right. Talk amongst yourselves while I sop this up.
Oh, Joe, what you been playing?
Probably Legion. I been a couple weeks off from Legion because the league ended and then a new league started and I was out of town. So I mean, I feel like I've probably played Legion since we last talked.
I would certainly guess that you had.
Been painting Legion, that's for sure. I'm painting my Rebel Veterans right now.
Oh, you're doing Veterans?
As we speak. I think that's probably it. I haven't played X-Wing in a while.
Wow.
I haven't played... Yeah, I think it's probably just Legion. I've been meaning to get to some other stuff, but just haven't had time.
Well, I think you're making good life choices as far as that's concerned. Leo might be able to tell us what's going on. I can hear the sounds of paper towel being used. We will assume he will join us soon, not immediately. So, aside from clean up and eulogize the whiskey, what you been playing?
Made it. Poured a new glass.
Oh, good.
Let's try this again. This time without the oops.
Oh.
All right. What have I been playing? Legion. I've been playing Legion.
Good answer.
I had my Winnipeg Rally Point qualifier. Did not do as good as Joe did. I only got third place instead of first. So.
Out of how many?
11 people attended.
That's damn good.
So
give yourself that. Come on.
So no Worlds invite for me,
Aww.
but also then, no pressure to spend money to go to Adepticon either.
Yeah. You could still come and do the last chance qualifier and hang out.
Yeah.
In Chicago in March, which I'm sure will be just lovely.
You can be Joe's caddy. You can carry his miniatures.
Range 2?
Yeah.
Movement speed 1?
Hand me the rangefinder.
And playing it. Yeah, no, I got stomped by Triple Tauntauns.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, so I was playing an all long range list. I had DLTs, I had snipers, I had death troopers. And for this match, we won. We got paired up on the table that I was dreading most being on. It was full of a ton of tall buildings. There was like line of sights for my snipers and everything. And then he got lucky, and then he was blue player, and limited visibility came up as the third option, so there was no way for me to cancel out limited visibility. So of course he went straight for that. Yep. And he was able to basically just run his tauntauns right up to my snipers before they could shoot and murder them, and it was all downhill from there. It was Sean Morris of the Terrain Studio was the guy who defeated me.
Oh.
Like he did all the tables for Worlds.
Oh. Okay. Well, I mean, at least you lost to a named guy.
Yeah.
Not just a red shirt.
Exactly.
Who'd you lose to? Hugh Man.
Hate that guy.
And I've been still playing X-Wing League. I picked up some Republic ships the other day, so I finally have spread beyond the Imperials for 2.0. So it was cool. I didn't do so well in my game because I've only got 3 ships so far, so I was only able to field 1 Aether Sprite and 2 N1s. I think if I would have had a 4th ship on the board, I probably would have been okay. I probably would have won that match if I had had a 4th ship on the board. But, that's the way it is.
Yes, it is.
But that's why I'm really excited after reading that article about the Y-Wing that just came out today, the Republic Y-Wing. Because that looks like that's going to be a cool ship to fly. There's some really interesting abilities on a lot of the pilots.
Cool. I had not looked very closely at it, but maybe I will now. I just noticed that Chopper was in it, which is rad. but that's
I
really...
think there's an R2D2 as a pilot.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you can recreate those episodes where 3PO and Chopper are kind of on their own and they squash that little dude.
Oh.
Because you can have... It looked like you could have R2 as the pilot, but then you get a crew slot instead of an astromech slot, because obviously R2's in the slot. So you can have 3PO in the thing with R2.
That's rad. But tonight, we're going to talk more about Legion. What a surprise. But rather than talking about new releases or news or trying to theory craft, we're going to talk about rules. And here's one of the reasons why I'm excited to talk about rules. It's not usually an exciting thing, but at my favorite stores, Legion Night, which I started, and that's not a brag, it's the fact, I started Legion Night, I wound up as a referee just last night. And, you know, everyone that comes in, I've told them, like, look, I'm still learning, and they're like, yeah, I'm still learning too, so we're just having fun and having to slow down and check rules and trying to, you know, decipher things as they come up. So last night was certainly a chance for me to get better at some of the rules.
Did you say decipher? Are we going to talk about the CCG?
I did. I'm sorry. I should have prefaced that with a small d.
Perked up like Lobot.
That's pretty accurate, actually. Lobot with a huge beard. So, we're going to look at some of the rules tonight that I and other folks have had questions about. So, it's not just me being dumb, although it's part of it, but other folks, like when I'm playing the game with them or I'm reffing for them, like I did last night, these questions come up. And, you know, either I know the rule or I spend several minutes trying to pull the PDF up on my phone so I can look at it. So, are you gentlemen prepared to expound on these and tell me why I'm dumb and wrong?
Yeah, I'm always prepared to tell people why they're dumb and wrong. It's
kind of what you live for.
Yeah. I'm like the Wolverine of telling people they're dumb and wrong.
You're the best there is at what you do.
Uh-huh.
And what you do is for the betterment of mankind.
And what I do ain't nice. So.
And Joe, what's your excuse?
For what? I'm not...
I don't know. I want you to, you know, get pumped to talk some rules.
Yeah. Ooh. Rules. Judge.
Yeah, I did get called that a few times last night. All right.
I find it curious that you call yourself a referee. I don't know if I've ever heard the judge or tournament organizer referred to as the referee. Sort of implies a different role to me. Like you're hovering, waiting for someone to screw up, and then you blow your whistle and like say no penalty.
He's like in that Key and Peele like football celebration thing where like the guys only, like the football players only allowed like 2 hip thrusts, so the referee's like watching him to make sure he doesn't do a third hip thrust during his touchdown celebration.
That's right.
He's just there with the whistle like staring at his crotch.
Well, you know, I didn't want to just call myself a judge without having gone to Legion Judge School.
It seems like judge implies more of an official event, whereas referee would be like a casual game night.
There you go. He gets it.
It sounds more active to me.
I was walking around the
point,
table looking at it.
At this point in your since everyone in your group is new, that's probably how you want to do it. Is like peek and correct people if they're doing it wrong, because it's likely that they will be since they're new.
I mean, and technically a judge at events is supposed to be keeping their eye open for people doing things wrong too.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, at that level, it's usually if nobody calls you for something, you just kind of not unless you see someone doing something super wrong and like illegal.
Yeah.
But if people like
so you're a lazy judge, is what you're saying. You got it.
He waits for a fight to break out.
I'm not going to intervene if they don't ask for involvement. If both players agree that this is how it's supposed to be played, even if that way is wrong, they can carry on.
You need to reread the Fantasy Flight floor rules, then, son.
Oh dear! Oh no! What have we started? All right, let's get back on track before we start a whole new podcast about Fantasy Flight floor rules. All right, first up, here we go.
All right.
Suppression. So, I understand that when a unit gets shot at, whether or not they get hit, they get a suppression token because they were shot at, right?
I mean, a hit or a crit has to come up on a die result.
Right. So if you roll all blanks, you're not getting suppressed.
Wow. Okay. See, already, you corrected me because from reading the rules, I thought it read such that it said, even if they don't get hit, they still been shot at.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's basic. That's just meaning say I roll 2 hits and then you roll 2 blocks.
Right.
You didn't take any damage, but you still get suppression.
Like if I shoot in your general direction, you're still going to duck because I shot.
Right.
Even if those bullets hit your cover. If I just mess up so bad and I roll blanks and I don't even shoot or I shoot the other direction, you're not going to like duck.
Yeah, when you roll all blanks, it's like you're just firing your gun in the air.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
or you jam or something.
Well, there you go. You've already answered one question that I thought I had down.
And I suppose just to clarify, this is on ranged attacks only. Melee attacks do not cause suppression.
Throwing a punch at someone does not make them duck.
unless you're Jin. Jin's baton weapon does have the suppressive keyword.
But melee attacks do not innately cause suppression.
Gotcha. All right. So they have been shot at, and we'll assume that they took suppression.
Yep.
So if they took one. Man, just making sure I get all the terminology correct because there's a lot of the same words being used different ways, it feels like. So let's say they've got a courage of 2. They took 1. What's their current status?
Okay, they got a courage. So you cut out right when you said the number.
Okay, sorry. So courage 2.
Okay. 1 suppression.
And they have 1 suppression, yes. Are they suppressed?
No.
Okay.
They do gain a cover bonus. As long as you have at least 1 suppression token, you get to increase your cover level by 1.
This is something that came up a lot. It just makes logical sense that I have a suppression token. I am considered suppressed. That's not the case. That is wrong, even though everybody just assumes that because it makes sense.
Yeah, you're not actually considered suppressed until you have a number of suppression tokens equal to
your courage value.
Your courage value.
Which is the point where you lose one of your 2 actions.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And you having said that like this came up a lot in the past, if people are wondering like why are we talking about this now? The game is over a year old. I can guarantee you that there are people who are waiting for Clone Wars to get into it. And
oh yeah, there's going to be in the next few months. There's going to be lots of new players.
It was only with some of the more recent expansions where it start referencing suppressed. I
mean, for a long time, almost everybody except your leader all had 1 courage.
Well, and what's that? The one that lets you do a move when you're suppressed, if you take a suppression.
There's
compel. Yeah, I remember a lot of people are confused about how compel worked. Thought they could maybe get 3 actions out of it, but because there was misunderstanding with the definition of suppressed.
Okay.
So yes. So yeah, the definition suppressed is when you have equal whatever your courage is. Panic, on the other hand, happens when you hit double your courage. When you have double or more of suppression tokens of whatever your courage value is.
After your rally step.
Yes, after your rally. So it happens after rally.
It's possible you could shake it off.
Now, panic, though, if you are within range 3 of your commander, for the purposes of calculating panic, you get to use their courage value. But again, that's only for panic. It's not to see if you're suppressed.
Okay.
Your dude's essentially getting shot at, and he's like, and he's about to poop his pants, and then he looks up and he sees Luke Skywalker swinging his lightsaber, and he goes, and he feels like a swell of courage, and he hangs in there and he clenches up and he keeps going. But if Luke Skywalker were 20 more feet away and he doesn't see him, or he's too small in the distance, then he poops himself and starts to run.
I assume pooping's a free action.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, it's part of it happens when you panic.
Oh, okay.
Yep, it's part of
It's part of the panic. Do they have poop tokens for that?
Yes,
okay, great.
Yep.
But only acrylic ones. Mm-hmm. All right. So just to bring it back down to a lower level then, the normal troopers, so Stormtrooper, Rebel Trooper, they only have a courage of 1.
Yep.
So it doesn't take much for them.
No. 2 suppression tokens is all it takes, but a majority of the time they're going to be within range 3 of your commander, because those units you're generally want to be in range to receive orders from your commander anyways, so.
Yeah, they're not going to be off in their own zone like a Death Trooper or a Pathfinder would.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes a bit more sense because, looking at their courage and looking at the rules, I'm like, they're just going to take a hit or 2 and then freak out and run off. But having that commander close by is the key.
Yeah. And it's important to note that courage is that courage value is for the entire unit. I know when the game first came out, there was a lot of confusion where people thought it was sort of cumulative, like the health value. Mm-hmm. The health value is 1 health for each mini in your Stormtrooper unit, right? So there were some people who thought that courage was also cumulative. So if you have a unit of 6 Stormtroopers, you have a courage of 6. That's not the case.
It does make sense. I mean, if you're brand new to it and the game just came out, it does make sense.
Right. Also, because you look at 1 and you're like, these guys are going to cut and run immediately.
Right.
Which, in practice, usually it takes a lot of work to get someone to panic.
Yeah, that is what it seemed like. Suppression tokens come and go pretty rapidly. It
right.
is.
You have to really focus fire somebody to get them to panic.
Yeah, there's except for some certain situations, most of the time if you're focusing down a unit, you're probably going to end up killing them before you actually panic them.
Okay.
Unless they roll really bad on their rally or you manage to isolate them away from their commander or something like that.
All right.
Yeah, I've had plenty of people panic, but it's certainly not a super common thing.
All right, well, perfect segue, because the next question is on rally and recovering. And one of the things that kind of threw me off was that looking at the learn to play guide, it puts one or both of those in the back in the advanced rules, not in the here's the different actions you take on your turn section. So
yeah, well, I think because in the learn to play originally, like I think they just skip suppression altogether, don't they?
it's in the back. It's in the advanced rules section. So you're like jumping back and forth trying to figure out what's going on with that. So rally.
So it's not an action. Rally just is a step that happens at the beginning of your unit's activation. Like you activate the unit and then you rally.
So if I've got fleet troopers out there, I'm activating fleet troopers. They've got one suppression. How do they rally?
So you roll one white die. You roll one white die for each suppression they have. They have 27 suppression. You roll 27 white die. I've never got up to 27. The most I've ever had on a unit was 12.
What? How?
Well, it's because it was Sabine managed to survive through. She already had a few suppression, and then she got attacked 5 times in a row, or was it 4 or 5 times in a row by Palpatine's lightning attack on the round where he used "and now you will die," so you can do multiple attacks that turn.
Okay.
And he like really wanted to kill Sabine, and the attack is suppressive. So I was taking 2 suppression every time, and he did it 4 or 5 times, and I already had some suppression. And Sabine, I managed to just roll god rolls with my defense dice, and I survived through all those attacks.
Did you have her 2-pip card?
Yes, and I played her 2-pip card, so I got a free recover when I activated her,
removes all
and
your
it just
suppression.
all went away.
And that's when people learn, trying to panic Sabine before she's played that card is worthless.
Okay, so that's the other part of the question is rally and recover kind of have similar function, but not really.
Yeah, rally is just a thing that happens at the beginning of your activation.
Yeah, I'll
recover
be here to explain thematically what's happening.
Yes,
Rally is when they really just grit their teeth and they go, come on, do it, keep fighting, and they're trying to convince themselves to keep doing it. Sometimes they power through and they keep going. Sometimes they just go, nope, can't do it, and nothing changes. Recover is when they all go away. That's when they just go, okay, we're going to take a second. We're going to get our composure. We're going to go back and fight in a minute. Not right now. We're just going to sit here and relax.
Yeah. Recover is in the 80s movie when, the plucky kid, but the one that everybody underestimates, gives a speech about how they're not going to let the evil corporation take over their camp or whatever, and then everyone's like, "Yeah." That's what recovering is. But yes, so recover is an action you take that just wipes out all your suppression.
It will also,
if you have any exhausted cards, those cards then also ready.
Like ion weapons or rocket launchers, cards that you have to exhaust when you use. The recover brings them all back up.
Yeah.
Force powers.
Yep,
There's like Armageddon happening outside, so let me know if it's too loud.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, I think we should, anytime we go through game rules, Joe needs to translate it to the narrative side of it.
I would love that. That's what I love doing that.
Do a whole episode going through the rules reference guide. We'll do each one. And
That's not a bad idea.
I see nothing wrong with this at all. So, okay, so rally is just the thing that happens.
Yeah, with Now rally happens before you check to see if you're suppressed, okay? So you rally, and then after you're done rallying, then you check and see how many suppression you have left. And then that's when you determine, am I suppressed? Am I panicked? So since recover happens after you do the suppression check, let's say you rally and you still are suppressed at the time, then you do a recover and you remove all your suppression. You don't get that. You don't earn that second action back. Then you still only get that one action, which is now been used up by your recover.
But likewise, if you started your turn and you were not suppressed and you have both of your actions, and at some point during your two actions, like after your first one, you did something that made you gain a suppression, you still get both of your actions. If you get one or two actions is locked in after your rally step, regardless of what else happens.
Okay,
on your turn.
I'm with you now. Okay, so and we said recover is just an action. It's an action you can do the same as move or fight or shoot or whatever. Okay.
Yep.
So it's
So your dude's taking a little break.
So it's you activate, you rally, you see what happens, you move on from there. Then you've got your two actions. Done. Perfect. I think suppression and rally recover all kind of went together. We're shifting gears now to one of the ones that drove me nuts, and I'm still very unclear about it. But fortunately, last night we did not play with much elevation, and that's climbing and clambering. So what's the Cliff Notes difference between the two?
Okay, climbing is taking your time and climbing slowly and safely. So it takes your whole activation. It takes both your actions to climb up a wall or a cliff or whatever, up to height 1. Okay, so you can climb maximum of height 1. Clambering, you're moving faster, so it only takes one action. But because you're climbing faster, it's riskier, so you have to roll dice and possibly take damage to represent falling or scraping or whatever as you're climbing up.
I like to think during clambering, typically you're risking breaking your ankles. Like, you guys are going to fall and, break their ankle and be like, I'm out. Sometimes you're going to fall to your death. Depends on how high you're climbing.
Okay, so what you've just said, if I'm getting it right, climbing, 2 actions to go...
No risk.
No risk. To go 1 distance height.
Yep, Yep. Basically, you can climb up anything that's height 1.
Okay.
Clambering is the same. It's height 1, but it only takes 1 action instead of 2. But again, it's because you're going faster, it's riskier, and you might hurt yourself.
Then you roll 1 white die for each mini in the unit that did a clamber. On a block, they take a wound. And only a block. So there's a 1 in 6 chance on each die that you're going to get ouched.
And so you have to do clambering if you ever want to climb something that's like height 2. Yes. I mean, unless there's a ledge you can stand on that's height 1.
But it's still you can climb up to height 2, but then you have to throw in the white dice, 1 for each dude. If you clamber up to height 2, you roll 2 white dice for each guy, I think. Because I know if you go up to height 2 on a clamber, rather than 1 white dice per mini, it's 2, because it's higher. It's more likely that you're going to fall. If you climb up to height 2, because it's a longer climb, even though you're taking it slow, you're still at a risk. So you have 1 white die.
Okay, so the highest you can go, just in general, the highest you can climb or clamber, it sounds like it's 1 safely, 2 dangerously. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you are cool like Boba or Sabine and have jump 3, you can go up a 3 height thing, but then you're technically not climbing or clambering. You just get to go there.
Okay. So as much as we have talked like on Discord about the kind of terrain that you should have for a Legion game and having lots of cover and having different elevations, you're probably not going to have anything that's...
Hey, Joe, I double-checked that. Climbing can only be done to height 1. If you want to go to height 2, you have to do 2 clambers.
Sorry, so the second half of my question was, you're just not going to be going up very high at all.
Sorry, you cut out on me again here.
Okay. You're just not going to be doing much climbing, and when you do climb or clamber, you're not going to be going very high unless you have a jetpack.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way it is right now. I mean, and it also depends on your terrain. I mean, if you've got like ladders or something like that on your terrain, you can rule that, like you can go up that in one action without rolling dice or something like that. It kind of depends on the terrain too. And that's why there's also like, I will often put grappling hooks on my snipers so that if I can't deploy them already at height, somewhere at height, so they get good sightline of the whole table,
right.
Then I've got my grappling hook so they can climb up something without having to roll the dice.
Okay.
That sort of related note, when you deploy people, they have to be on the same plane. Like if you got a little ledge and you have half of the minis on the ledge and half of them, even if it's just a tiny little thing, that's not allowed apparently. When you deploy, all your guys have to be on the same plane.
And yes, after you move, they can be on different levels. I mean, you're supposed to put them on the same level if possible, but they don't have to be. But when you deploy, they do have to be on the same level.
And to clarify, you're talking about each individual model of a unit.
Yeah.
Did I cut out?
No, I said yeah.
Okay.
Each mini in the unit.
I didn't hear
they're supposed to be. Yeah. They're supposed to be on the same level. If it's not possible, you can still place them in what's called vertical cohesion, which is basically like basically all the minis. Say all the minis, you climb up to the top of like a little building. There's only room for 5 of your minis. You would just leave the 6th one down in base contact with the edge of the building. That's still legal.
Okay. I just want to make sure that anyone listening wasn't at all confused by saying everyone has to be on the same plane. We don't mean like Unit 1 and Unit 2. We mean the different models of Unit 1 have to deploy together. Okay. So that makes a bit more sense, and because what you said about making sure they use the grappling hooks if they want to get a good firing perch, it makes those make more sense and seem more useful. Because when I'm putting my army together, I often overlook that, thinking, why do I need that? That's just to fill out some points. So that makes more sense, having those in mind for added mobility. Do you guys? This is completely off of like the rules, but do you guys find yourselves doing that? Because when Christian and I were playing a game, you told me like don't even bother with climbing or clambering, just shoot them.
Well, I mean, it depends on the situation. Like I was saying, in yours, you had the grenade launcher.
Yes.
And I mean, at that point you were probably better off just sitting down there and firing the short range grenade launcher at them. It's situational, like stormtroopers sitting down on the ground throwing white dice up at somebody in heavy cover on a building. Maybe then they might want to.
Okay.
Because then you're just crit fishing, if you for the most part.
Okay, fair enough.
So I mean, like I said, it's situational.
Well, I'm sure the next one we're going to talk about is exactly the same, because we're going to talk about line of sight. We've talked about line of sight before on the show, talking about Imperial Assault, and this one is much more, it seems like it's much more crouch behind your guy to see what you can see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
But
yeah,
even
you have to
then-
do that.
Okay.
Actually, that was actually a problem I had at that Rally Point qualifier. On that last map we played, there was so many different buildings of varying heights that it was very difficult to actually get down and accurately judge line of sights properly, because like you couldn't get your head
Sometimes you
down
gotta
to see.
hold your phone so the camera's right behind their head.
Yeah, I've done that before.
Oh, really? Okay. I mean, it makes sense. I just would not have thought of that. And it's, again, just to clarify, it's like what, the top of the head of the unit leader is the
Yep,
point from
yep,
which
that's
you aim?
Well, when you're determining cover, yes. You'll still check line of sight from other minis in the unit, just to like verify that they can see whatever you're shooting at. Like sometimes maybe you'll have one guy that's a little bit further back, so he's around a corner of a building or whatever. If you check that mini's line of sight and he can't see the person you're attacking, then he can't contribute his dice to the attack pool. But generally speaking, yeah, you're usually just checking line of sight from your unit leader to the defender.
Yeah, and you can kind of take it the other way too. It could be possible that your unit leader has no clear line of sight to the person you want to shoot, but every other mini does. You can still make that attack. They're just going to have cover because
heavy cover.
Because your unit leader is the one you determine cover from, and obviously he can't see them, so they've got the cover. But everyone else can still draw line of sight, so they can still throw their dice in the attack pool. The unit leader doesn't get to put his dice in.
Yeah,
And
so
the
sometimes
defenders will have cover.
Yeah, that could sometimes lead to some weird situations where an enemy unit could be out in the middle of nowhere, completely in the open, but they would still get cover just because the unit leader can't see them.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
This is one that's very hard to figure out thematically, because the unit leader is just like, you guys see somebody out there? They're like, yeah, they're right out there. 'Cause I can't see him. I'm going to trust you guys. Just shoot in that direction.
The unit leader is busy micromanaging him. He's all like, no, I'm pretty sure you guys need to point your barrels like 15 degrees more to the left there.
There you go. That
Like,
sounds
no,
right.
We can see them. He's like, no, I'm in charge here. And half of the guys
Verified.
are like, while they're shooting, they're looking over back at the unit leader, like, what?
I can verify
why they're
this.
not
This
as
is how it
accurate.
is in real life. Perfect. That explains it. Thank you. So, is there like a... We just talked about if you're shooting and your leader is like behind, does not have line of sight, it can jack up your shot. But like if you have a bead on, let's say 1 out of 5 models from an enemy unit, so you have a clear shot on one guy, he's poking out, but the other 4 are like behind a wall. What does
So,
that
like-
constitute?
So like if you're saying so they're like behind a wall and nobody in your attacking unit can see those 4 at all.
Right, but you got that one guy who's poking out.
Then you can only deal damage to minis that at least one mini in the attacking unit can see. That so you can only deal damage to ones that somebody in the unit has line of sight to.
Right. So
if you can only see that one, that's the only one you can do damage to.
You roll 50 damage, but the one mini is the only one that you have
so
line
you
of
just
sight
blow
to.
the
that guy gets nuked.
out of
everyone
that
else
one.
Is fine.
But that's also a strategy. I mean, it's called it's like a line of sight sniping, where sometimes you will move your unit and
Ooh, you hear that thunder?
yeah, wow, that was loud.
Jeez.
You'll move your unit, and then through cohesion and stuff, you will make sure that your unit can only see, say, like the heavy weapons mini or the medic mini, and then since that's the only one you can see, you get to snipe that guy out of the unit.
Oh.
Whereas normally if you're shooting at the whole unit, your opponent gets to decide which minis they pull out.
Right.
But if the only guy you can see is like that heavy weapons, then he's the only one that gets to take damage. So so there's times where you will use that to your advantage.
Wow. Would not have thought about that either. Okay. So not sure how quite to phrase the next part of the question, because you've so far answered it such that it sounds like 9 times out of 10 it's going to be heavy cover. What's the dividing line between light and heavy? Is it the perceived agreed material of what they are behind, like wood versus rock?
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
exactly. I mean that's one of the steps you're supposed to do at the very beginning of the game. Is you guys you look at you get the board all arranged, and then you say like, okay, let's say all these buildings will grant heavy cover. All these bushes will grant light cover. And you kind
this
of
is area terrain, this is difficult terrain, this.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can't just say this is heavy cover. You have to say this is heavy cover for a trooper unit. The same thing might be light cover for an ATST, because they're all different sizes, and how much of the terrain can obstruct how much of the mini affects what type of cover it is. Too.
Yeah, exactly. Generally speaking, you would say if a piece of terrain is big enough to cover 50% of a mini,
it gives that mini cover.
It gives that mini cover. So
it's kind of up to you to decide if it's light or not.
Yeah. So you might say, okay, so this piece of terrain, it's going to give heavy cover to troopers, and it's going to give heavy cover to ATRTs, but this ATST is too damn tall. It doesn't get any cover from this piece of terrain. And like I said, that's just kind of stuff you have to talk about at the beginning of your game, and how the discussion goes is going to vary depending on what units you both bring. Like, frankly, vehicles, for the most part, except for Tauntauns now, are kind of non-meta. So mostly you're just dealing with all troopers, so it's a pretty quick conversation.
I think the rules say that if a piece of terrain is capable of obscuring 100% of a mini, it's always heavy cover. But I'm not positive on that, and I still feel like whatever. If you both agree,
it doesn't say that. I mean, if it's just if you're obscured 100%, you just can't be a target because they can't see you.
Well, that's different. At the beginning of the game, if I set my one dude behind this big wood wall, which I usually think wood things tend to provide a light cover, I say, okay, this gives me heavy cover. Later in the game, half of my guys are behind it, half are not, because it's the 50% or more rule only matters when you're saying what's what. During the game, it's a different story. When you're making attacks, then it just has to do with, am I obscured or not? And if I am, or if I have more than one mini in my unit, is how many of them are obscured.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So it's a combination of how many models in a unit are obscured and how much of the targetable, the eligible target models of the unit, what percentage of them are obscured by terrain.
Yeah. So basically, to figure out if something has cover, what you do is you look from the point of view of your unit leader, the attacking unit leader, right? You check line of sight to each mini in the defender. Now, basically, if a piece of terrain blocks the leader's view of any part of that mini, whether it's the very tip of their gun barrel or just a tiny corner of their base or whatever, that's then you have to go on to the next step to see if think of it sort of like in 3.5 where you roll a 20 and you're like, oh, it's a threat to crit. Okay, right now if a piece of terrain is covering any piece of a mini, it's like a threat to cover. Okay, so you look and you would say, okay, there is a bush blocking part of this mini. Okay. So then you sort of switch to like a tactical view where you're looking top down.
Okay.
And you draw an imaginary line from the center of your leader's base to the center of that mini's base, right?
Okay.
Now, if that line passes through the piece of terrain that was blocking your view of the mini in some way, then the mini is considered obscured. Okay?
So not from the head.
Nope, this is just like a top-down 2D plane now at this point.
Yeah, you go, okay, I can't see that guy's foot. So now, center to center, if that line passes through it, it's obscured. If it doesn't, he's not obscured.
Yep. And then so basically then you figure out, okay, are at least half the minis in the unit obscured? If it's less than half, it's no cover. If it's more than half, then they get cover of whatever the type of terrain is that was obscured. Determined. Yep.
Okay.
I still think you should make a video, Leo, because it's really pretty simple once you know how to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure once you get a few games under your belt, it's not that bad. But trying to parse it out seems like an exercise in
a really
lawyering.
Important step is determining what terrain provides what type of cover to what type of units during setup before you deploy or do anything, and making sure you're all on the same page about it. Because sometimes you might forget that, especially when you're new, and it's kind of a weird step. And then you're halfway through the game and you're like, oh, this gives me light cover? And they're like, no, I think that gives you heavy cover. And you're like,
Which is what we ran into last night. Okay.
Yeah.
That's something that needs to be determined at the start of the game. And if you run into that, you can always just ask the judge and be like, what kind of cover do you think this is? And we'll defer to you.
Which is also what happened last night, because the question came up and they asked me to be the impartial judge. And I'm like, well, looking at the rules, looking at the suggested, a terrain type and the suggested coverage type that goes with that, here's the ruling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like that's a good thing to look at. Like if you and your opponent can't agree on what a piece of how a piece of terrain should behave, those charts in the rulebook are pretty good. I mean, they're all pretty much common sense. So I mean, 9 times out of 10, you and your opponent would probably come to the exact same conclusions anyway.
Right.
But again, those charts are just suggestions, though. Also, so if you and your opponent decide to play a piece of terrain a little bit different than what it says in the book, that's fine. With the exception of barricades. Barricades are the one piece of terrain that's like specifically spelled out in the rulebook that barricades give troopers heavy cover. They do not, and then they do not grant cover to vehicles at all, but troopers always get heavy cover from barricades.
I would mention that the whole seemingly complex process we went through earlier, that's only good. That doesn't usually happen. Usually, you don't have to go to the step where you check the center line, because a lot of times, if they're behind some kind of low object, that line is going to pass through it because it's in front of them. Think of like a barricade, or
it kind of happens where they're like peeking out from around the corner of a building, and you're like, is this guy far enough out from the corner of the building that he gives cover or not?
And you already
that he gets cover
usually
or not.
Can tell, like, okay, well, it's clear to me that 4 out of your 6 guys are unobscured, so we don't have to bother with the rest because I know you don't get cover. A lot of times it's pretty cut and dry. That's just, the steps to walk it out when it is a little bit more kind of close. When you're like, oh, is that guy behind that? And how many of them? And really dumb one that came up during the Rally Point qualifier. Picture like a small mound, maybe with like a big tree on it. And we've got Bosk standing next to the tree, mostly exposed, and I'm shooting at him. So the tree is like covering up maybe like his hand or whatever is on the side of him.
Okay.
And so I say, okay, he's being obscured, but I can see most of him, so I'm assuming this will go my way. But now we check the center line to center line. Even though I can see almost all of him, we have a hill, right? Bosk is near the far side of the hill. Mm-hmm. So the line, because this piece of terrain is kind of like a circle shape, the line's going to go cross over that before it gets to Bosk, and now he has cover. And I was like, oh, that's dumb. Because this tree was part of like another... it wasn't just the tree, it was like the landscape around the tree too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that's kind of dumb, but that's how it... Usually it's not done like that. I think it works well.
All right. Well,
and it's really easy and fun when you're shooting at a unit that only has one miniature. Then it's a lot easier to tell what's going on.
Is there and I think I already know the answer to this, but a distance from model to piece of terrain at which point they gain or lose that cover?
They just have to be close enough so that from the attacker's point of view, they are obscured by it. They are obscured by it. If they're obscured from the attacker's point of view, I mean. So the thing is like, if you're shooting at somebody from one end of the table to the other, and there's a piece of terrain then at the center of the table, even though you're way the f away, if it's a big enough piece that it partially obscures you, mm-hmm. You're going to get cover. Now, the one time when distance does come into play is if you are in base contact with a piece of terrain, when you are then making an attack, the piece of terrain you're in base contact with cannot be considered to be obscuring to your opponent.
Yeah, and this is another thing that I don't know if they mentioned in the book. You should, if there's like a really big piece of terrain, like maybe there's like a really long fence or a wall that's in an L shape, you know, and I'm on touching one branch of the wall and you're hiding behind the other branch of it. It doesn't make sense that I should be able to ignore that part that's covering you. Like, if there's a really big piece, sometimes you want to say, okay, if I'm touching this, I only get to ignore this chunk of it. Instead of, like, this giant thing all of a sudden becomes non-existent for the point of cover.
Yeah, sometimes it makes sense to break pieces of terrain up into smaller ones for cover purposes. Otherwise, you get into weird situations sometimes.
Sometimes there's something between you and you're like, okay, I have cover, and they're like, no, you don't. You're like, what? And then you check, and just because of the distance and the angle, sure enough, you look from their point of view, they can see all of your guys, and that cover's not obscuring you. You're like, oh, I just got schooled by physics or something.
Yeah. And yeah, a question from patron chat from Meat Castle that he and I were kind of mulling over when we played our last game, because like Leo, you brought up with like D&D, like in the past when it was a very tactical game, you would have like 1/4 cover, half cover, 3/4, and even with 40K and Kill Team, there's like a half cover, full cover kind of thing. But here it's basically nothing, or you are simply obscured, and then that agreement that you made at the beginning comes into play.
Yeah, exactly. Cover this game is it's a binary thing. It's yes or no.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's never like, okay, this thing we said gives heavy cover, but I'm only a little bit covered by it, so we'll say light cover. That's not a thing. It's either you have the cover we said this grants, or you don't have any cover.
Okay.
And I feel like that's a good thing. It helps prevent people haggling then over.
Yeah, I mean, I've had more casual games where we're like, oh crap, we forgot to say what this is, and I'm like, I think it's heavy, and they're like, I think it's none. And we're like, I don't want to think about it, so split the difference, call it light, and we're like, okay,
light, yeah. And
that's technically not correct.
Yeah. But, or you know what? Sometimes if you and your opponent can't agree, just have a roll off.
Right.
Okay. Well, he asked
rules, but I do think as long as you and your opponent agree on it, terrain can be like whatever you want it to be. As long as both players are in concurrence, it's like all right.
Yeah, I mean we've played, and sometimes we play with weird things. Like we've got this terrain, like it's like a landing pad, sort of like the Endor landing pad.
Yeah.
And so it's really tall. I think it's over height too, if I remember right.
Yeah, we have one like that too. Is it that MDF one?
Yeah, the one from Kiwi Terrain.
We have that same one at our store.
And we usually play like if you come into base contact with the door, then as like just like as a move action, you can then move from the door. It's like you're riding the elevator up, and then just basically pop out on top of the platform.
We do that exact same thing.
And that's like something that's not really covered in the rules, but there you go.
All right. Well,
we did a thing with terrain where we had a river on our map, and we're like, you know what? Let's say this thing has a current, and it's like waist deep. So if you're standing in the river, you get light cover. And if you end your movement in the river, you have to do a 1-speed move in the direction we randomly decide the current is going at the beginning of the game. And we did that, and it was fun. We flipped a coin at the beginning of the game. We're like, is the river flowing this side of the table or that side? And it was neat.
That does sound interesting. And I think we could come up with lots of different scenarios that we could hash out all night long, honestly. So we'll put a pin in line of sight for now. Probably come back to it in the future. But I had one more section that I wanted to touch on, and they're a bit more disconnected questions, but they are ones that I've had to okay, stop, look it up, collaborate, listen. So when you've got different weapons on a unit, with things like DLT with the Stormtroopers or Bistan with the Pathfinders, it's pretty easy to differentiate. This guy has the big gun. The rest of them have the smaller guns. Mm-hmm. So their pool is this, his pool is that. Done. This one goes
technically,
here.
it's all one pool.
If you want,
as long as you're firing at the same target.
Yeah.
If you're firing at the same target.
Yes.
I'm splitting them up mentally, just so that we can differentiate. These guys are using an Alpha 300 rifle. This guy is using whatever DLT 19. They could all be shooting at the same target, or they could be shooting at different targets. But in any event, they are theoretically different pools.
No, they're the same pool.
But they could be shooting at different targets.
If they're shooting at different targets, yes, sorry.
Okay.
Then
And you have to... It's something people should always do if you are splitting up your guys' dice, which you can only do by weapon. You couldn't say, half of my E11s are going over here, the other half are going over here. Always, if you're doing that, set the dice near the target before you start any of them, just to make sure there's never any confusion of what's happening. Because a lot of times, if you have an AT-AT, it's going to shoot three things. And they're like, I'm going to do this. And then if you line it all up, then it's clear the choice has been locked in. No one's going to get confused as you go. No one's going to have any room to do take backsies and be like, oh, I was going to put both of the guns into this guy. Yeah, I think it's in the rules that you have to lay out the dice like that too, if you're splitting up.
And that's fine. I mean, that makes perfect sense to avoid that kind of situation. But if you've got Death Troopers for one, I'm sure there will be more in the future. Them and the Pathfinders have cards, armaments, right? Is what they call them?
Yeah.
That they are essentially, within the context of the fiction, modifying the main weapon on the unit card. So the Alpha 300 armament is applying to the Alpha 300 rifle on the unit card.
Yeah.
So long range, I'm just gonna think about Pathfinders right now. Long range armament is 1 white. The normal weapon is 2 white. The short range is 1 red. So when you're using the armament and I'm going to back up. You're using your Alpha 300 rifle. The long range just changes. It gives you an extra distance. But do you then add the 1 white die to the 2, or do you just roll the 1?
You just roll the 1. I mean,
it's a different gun.
Yeah, it's essentially, think of it as a different weapon, even though technically you are firing your main weapon, but you've changed the properties of it, so it's a different configuration. So it's essentially firing a different weapon. So you're only using the stats on that upgrade card.
And so then does that apply to every single model in the unit that uses an Alpha 300 rifle?
Oh, no. Only if you want it to. So if you want, you can have some fire their standard A300 and have some fire the A300 long range.
Okay. So then the advantage of using the long range config is that you get that extra, the up to range 4?
Yep, range 4. And technically, say if you had targets some at range 3 and some at range 4, if you at that point you could split fire. Then you could have some fire the standard configuration A300 at the range 3 target, and have the other ones use the long range configuration firing at the range 4 one. If you want it, since it's all white dice, I don't know if that's the best use of it, but it's an option. Sometimes you want to just get throw down some suppression. Yep.
And that's all you care about. It's like, I don't want you to have that action. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm just trying to spook you. If I kill you, that's a bonus, but not what I'm going for.
Okay, so it's a matter of, like, in this instance, I'm using that long-range armament so I can get the extra distance, but it takes me from 2 dice down to 1 white dice. And then when they get in range, if I take the recover action, then I can flip it to short range and turn it into a shotgun.
Essentially, yeah.
But you always have the choice of using whichever side is face up or the one that's printed on the unit card. So they always have that the option of one of those two.
Okay. Interesting. I was, for a good long while, quite confused by that, because it seemed like, do I add it? Does it replace? I don't know. So that makes that
I guess
that
I never looked at the
sense.
weapon names enough to. I was just like, oh, this is just an extra gun separate from the gun that's printed on their card.
Yeah, I mean, it makes more sense with someone like Jin, who she doesn't have a ranged weapon, and then when you give her the armament, then it's a whole new weapon for her. But, like, thematically, with, like, the Death Troopers or the Pathfinders, yeah, it's changing the configuration on the weapon they already have on their card. So it is a little weird, but yeah, as far as the rules are concerned, it behaves as if it was a separate weapon.
Maybe it's easy because you always have access to the mid-range option, like the medium one. So maybe it's always easy to swap on the fly without needing to slow down and recover between medium and long or medium and short, but you can't switch between long and short. But yeah, it's easiest just to consider those things just their own standalone guns and not in any way like linked to the one printed on the card.
Okay. I mean, as far as rules go, fine, sure. It just, plays havoc with what I'm picturing in my head of like, but it's the same weapon.
Yeah, well, maybe they need to, like, sort of like they have to take the time to, like, screw, like, a silencer type thing on the front. I don't know.
Or whatever. A scope or something.
Yep.
Well, it's like Jin's gun. You actually have to, like, put stuff on it.
Well, Cassian did put it in the sniper configuration. So that's what I always thought of at that point.
Or the gun you have in Republic Commando, where you're like swapping out bits to make it a rocket launcher or a sniper rifle or whatever.
Can't wait for that to come to Legion. That won't be confusing at all. All right, let's move on from that really quick. I've just got 2 more things, and we'll call it quits because we've been going a while. But grenades. Again, it's an upgrade for an entire unit, but who uses the grenades? Is it a single guy? Is it one grenade being thrown by the entire unit?
It all depends on what you want to do. You can have as many or as few minis in your unit throwing grenades as you want.
Usually, you want everybody chucking them, unless you have a special weapons guy who has things that are better than the grenade. Usually the snowtrooper with the flamethrower. But if you're in range to chuck grenades, you might as well have every mini in your unit throw that grenade. So let's say you got 5 rebel. You got a rebel troopers. There's 5 dudes in the squad. you got 4 dudes and a Z6 guy, and you're at range 1. So you could have everybody throw a grenade for like 5 red dice. Or you could say, okay, 4 are going to throw the grenade, and the Z6 is going to shoot for 4 red and 6 white.
Yeah. Or sometimes you want to use the grenade just to give you the option to split fire. So you some of your guys are shooting their blasters at one unit, and a couple of your guys are maybe chucking grenades at another.
Okay. That also clears that up for me. And last one, I've only recently purchased units that have the arm explosives and later detonate them. I couldn't even begin to tell someone last night how in the heck that's supposed to work.
As an action, if you have the arm thing, you get to put down a little bomb token. Technically, there's tokens
Or
that match
2 if you're Sabine.
Yeah. You should put them like blue side up if you're the blue player, just so you don't get confused with enemy bombs. The big thing is they have to be within range 1 of your guy, not at range 1. So if you lay down the run range thing from your guy, all of the bomb token has to be within that range thing. This is a big deal because if you then choose to detonate it, which I'll explain in a second, it's going to hurt you because obviously you're at range 1 of that thing. So if you throw it down and then blow it up, it's kind of a suicide thing, and you're hoping maybe it doesn't kill you. Sometimes that's worth it.
Sometimes suicide bombing is a valid strategy.
Because, you're like, well...
We're not going to make that the title of this episode.
So, okay, well, this bomb is going to hit 4 of his guys. I'll probably kill 2 guys and throw down 4 suppression. I think that's worth the risk of my guy going away. So that's... Remembering it has to be within range 1 is a big deal. Detonate is as simple as after anybody does anything, pretty much, does an action, somebody who has the detonate keyword can explode that many, it says detonate 1, detonate 2, or whatever, of that bomb type. So the rebel guy throws down a charge, and then he runs away. After he's done doing his runaway action, he can say, okay, I detonate it. Or it just sits there, and then Darth Vader on the other side of the map, he does a move, and then I say, okay, after he does that, I'm going to detonate it. Just after somebody does a thing, you can detonate.
Yeah, it's sort of weird how, and you can even detonate as a reaction to your own arming of action. And there's no range limit on detonate.
I was going to ask you that.
And it doesn't even have to be the bomb that same unit laid down.
As long as it's the right type of bomb, you can do it. Because the bombs that Sabine puts out, the bombs that the Rebel guys put out, and the bombs that the Imperial guys put out are all different types of bombs.
Okay.
And I assume there's a rule that says you can't, if you're playing Rebels versus Rebels, you can't detonate the other guy's bombs, even though it's the same type.
Yeah. So it's like, yes, the Rebel saboteurs cannot detonate Sabine's bombs. And
vice versa.
Vice versa.
Okay, so the last bit, that all makes sense as far as mechanics go. So the last bit of it's going to be more of a strategy question. I guess because, the opposing player can clearly see, I'm not going to go that way. How do you use it effectively? It's
there's
completely
two,
not a rules question.
I would say there's 2 things. One is you rush them in if you see a target of opportunity where they have a bunch of guys clustered up, so one bomb can hit a bunch of their army. Run in and suicide bomb, like I said. As I said, it's a valid strategy.
Something that I find myself able to do with Sabine a lot is, they're all clumped up there. Sabine is speed 3 with jump 3. She can just go, poof, I'm standing in all of your guys, or close enough where I can throw my bomb that's going to hit all of them. I'll throw my bombs out, and then I get a little free scooch away, blow them up. It's just, you see a cluster of guys, you go for it, and you try and hit as many dudes as you can.
Yeah. Sabine's explosions command card can be a game winner sometimes.
It's pretty nuts. With just the regular guys, that's still something you're like, okay, I see a big cluster of guys. I'm going to try and bum rush them, chuck a bomb out there, and drop it. Depending on if they've gone yet, if you've gone, you might be able to get into position. Next turn, you throw a bomb and then run. You throw the bomb out, then do a move to get away from them, and then detonate after you move. So you're safely out of the explosive distance. A lot of times when you throw a bomb, you blow it up the same turn, just so nobody has a chance to avoid it.
The other effective use of them is, say, on something like intercept the transmissions or key positions. You use your bombs as area control. Mm-hmm. You know, you get your saboteurs up there. You drop a bunch of bombs around, and like I said, you basically try and use your bombs as area denial or to funnel the enemy's army into some shooting lanes or something like that.
That's the one that makes the most sense for me right now. I guess I hadn't considered run in, drop it off, run out.
But yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't played a ton of saboteurs. I mean, most of my experience with explosive stuff comes from playing games with Sabine. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, if you are really good with them, they can definitely be very competitive. At Worlds, the last Worlds for Legion, a guy running a list with 3 saboteurs made it into the top 4 at Worlds.
Wow. I think you probably want a minimum of 2 if you're going to run with the bomb guys.
Yeah. That's the other thing is you don't really want to run them as a single, because sometimes what you'll do is like say you run 3 saboteurs, you have 2. Generally, what a lot of people do is you'll run 2 forward to drop bombs, and you keep one guy hidden, and you keep the third unit hidden. Because that third one can, even if the first 2 die, that third guy is still alive and can detonate all the bombs that the first 2 dropped.
That's pretty rad. Okay. All right, that makes a bit more sense. Because I bought the commandos and the scouts for the snipers, and then I'm looking at those bomb guys just like, what are you? What am I supposed to do with you? So, okay, that makes a bit more sense. We were getting into the strategic part at the end. That's all the questions that I had from the last few weeks of playing. If I thought about it ahead of time, I would have asked listeners and Discord folks and patrons for their questions, although I think most of them that play on a regular basis, like you two, have a pretty solid base for how those things are supposed to work. So, unless either of you have anything else that you want to add to this discussion, or just, to the world's greater knowledge, we'll wrap up because we've been going for a bit. I'll give you a moment if you have any thoughts.
My thoughts are, I feel like we were talking about the saboteurs in the point of view of strike teams only. You can always just throw them in a full squad and they're far less likely to die. You might have more luck getting your bombs off. But I think competitively, people don't like to use the full squads of commandos. But also, who says you have to try and be super competitive?
That's true.
Worth noting, anything you want to move through that, like barricade, if you want to walk over a barricade, you just slow yourself down by 1 and you decide if you're allowed to move over a thing in that manner if it's less than half of your height. So an
if you're no, that's wrong.
An AT
if you're a trooper It's as long as it's less than your height. So
Less
it could be
than your
99% of your height. As long as it's less than your height, you can move over it without climbing or clambering.
That's news to me.
The less than half your height is for vehicles.
So if there's a log, the ATST can walk over it because it's less than half its height. And that's something that you people might get all weird about because people pose their vehicles at different heights.
So that's true.
Yes, if you make a squatty ATST, you might be able to get more cover from things, but you'll also be able to step over less things.
They call that the General Wise Special.
The waddle, the squatting ATST.
All right. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed picking your brains on Legion rules because I've had a lot of fun with it, but then I hit these things that drive me nuts, and I'm just like, I don't know, we'll just figure something out and we'll keep moving. So I imagine we'll be returning when they keep adding new rules and new unit types. I don't know if they introduce anything new coming up in Clone Wars right away, but I'm sure there's something. Yeah, with that, have a good night, everybody. Enjoy life. I don't know. I really lost my train of thought on that one. Goodbye.
Bye.